Hey everybody, welcome back to the Help Me Parent podcast. My name is Kylie, and with me, as always, Dr. Ellen Moore. Hello.
Morning.
Well, it's just us two today in the studio, and we have survived the great Texas freeze of 2024. Almost said 2023.
Yeah.
But it is the new year. We have been stuck at our home the past 2 days. How did y'all manage during the freeze?
Great. We had electricity this time and water, so working in front of the fireplace I could get used to.
There you go. Yeah, I read a lot. I was just telling them I did a social media fast this week.
Good for you.
Yes, as a 23-year-old, it's very hard not having it, especially when there was a day where work from home and then nothing to do. But I managed. But I brought that up because that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Digital and social media in regards to kids, because that's the day we live in. It's 2024. Kids are surrounded by it. Generation Alpha is what we're talking about. So what is digital and social media for these kids? Screen time, all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think my first comment is, as a parent, I don't pretend to have all the answers here.
Mm-hmm.
My kids are, one's about to be 30. The other one is 27.
I think.
Yes, 27. So it was a different day and age when we raised our kids. We did have cell phones back then. It was... our kids were very upset when we wouldn't let them have cell phones at young ages. And so they tried to pull the thing of, well, how old were you when you got your first cell phone? I said, great, let's have that conversation. Because I was 30, literally, when I got my first cell phone. So obviously technology has changed, phones have changed, access has changed. Back then, even with our kids and their phones, they didn't initially have access to the internet, which that is really, for me, one of the pieces that is alarming and needs to be, I think, what I would say is intentionally thought about and addressed. So having said all of that, and we can talk about the things that we did for our kids, but you just have to be wise. And I am not a techie person, so I wouldn't say that I was, up on all the latest information related to technology. If I had young kids now, I would be. I would be researching and talking to people and finding out as much as I could before we got there.
Yes.
So, I am not a anti-technology person. I think it is part of our world. It's going to be part of our kids' worlds. And so I don't think we can put our heads in the sand and say, no, you're never going to have a phone. Yeah. Because even if they don't have a phone, it doesn't mean they don't have access.
Absolutely.
All their friends have phones. There are devices at school. They're just everywhere. So I think we just have to be wise about when we introduce them, how we introduce them, and to not be afraid of putting some parameters, some boundaries on them. Just like you were saying, you just did a social media fast. For all of us, boundaries can be very helpful in the digital space and all of the spaces. Yeah. But since we're talking about digitally, boundaries can just be helpful. And so I don't think there's any getting away from it. Generation Alpha is kids born 2010, depending on which numbers you look at. They're born either 2010 or 2012 to the present. And they are called the glass generation because their entire lives will be seen through glass.
Yeah.
Through some kind of device. And so I just think we have to really be smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And I even think about it when we were prepping for this episode. I thought about when I first got a phone. It was when I was in junior high, so about 2013. And it was just for call or text. So like I wasn't navigating this because I was thinking about like, I didn't have these problems when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, it's because that's not where we were. Of course, when I got to high school, that was because it was that time. So so we're talking about technology with kids. It does start at an early age. There's a lot of talk about like screen time with littles, and that's not as much as a pressing issue because it doesn't come with all the threats that the internet poses, just being like a show. But screen time for littles, what do you recommend or about that?
Well, I think a couple of things here just to kind of lead in. Let's just talk about social media for 1 second because we can then get that off the table. All of the social media platforms recommend, I don't know how much they monitor, but they say you can't get a profile until age 13.
Yes.
Right? So to me, that is minimal to just go with the guidelines for social media. I read a thing, I've done a good bit of reading on this, but the Surgeon General even recommends that kids not have social media until age 16.
Wow.
There is a piece that we have to be very aware of. It's not just about the social aspect, and all my friends are on it, I want to engage with them, all of that. But there is a very real brain development piece that goes into needs to be a factor here. And with all that, the world of social media, once you open that door and all that opens the door to, if they are not prepared in a very physical way with their brain development, if they're not prepared in terms of their values, in terms of how you value people and respect people, in terms of, we'll get into times and all of that, but just even what screen time does to your physical body, not to mention your mental and emotional self, and then not even mentioning the spiritual side. I think we just have to be super careful and not fearful, but wise and cautious and intentional. So social media, I think as long as we can hold off, the better.
Yeah. And how do you, like you talked about preparing them, how early does that start and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think this is where parents right now in 2024 have a very different job than I had when I was raising my kids in the late 90s, early 2000s, because we were able to wait and have the conversations like it didn't exist when they were babies.
Exactly.
So you didn't even have a conversation till they were older. Well, now it exists from conception.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation has to start immediately almost with kids, because it's just a part of the parents' world, even before it's a part of the kids' world, as far as them having one in their hand. But they see parents on devices, whether it's TV or phones or tablets, watches, all of it. And more is caught than taught. And so they're seeing that, they're picking up on that. So I think number one, it starts with ourselves as parents, making sure that we've got some boundaries, that we've got some things in place that will help us manage this in a way that is healthy for us and a wise, healthy example for our kids.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, because even though like on the social media platforms per se, it's 13, there's now games and stuff now with online chats where you can play with other people that just kind of opens up a whole new thing. And you can get on those way before 13. You can get on those as early as you can know how to play the game, 5 and stuff. So with...
Right. And I'll just say this, with the exposure that kids have, I think this is where the research side is really important for parents, because we can't assume that because it says kids that it is safe.
Yeah.
We can't assume YouTube kids, they're never going to be exposed to anything. There are people all over the world who this is their livelihood of finding loopholes and ways to expose things to kids that will, and they're trying to do it when they're early, because again, we're talking about brain development, and some of these things, if we're talking about porn or any of the other unkind things that are out there, people are trying to expose kids to that earlier and earlier because it does impact their development.
Yeah.
And the earlier exposure, the more risks there are. And so we just have to really be smart and to not, I think maybe we just go into a few little practical tips
things,
of number one, that whatever age you feel is appropriate for your child to have access to a device, whether it's to watch something on your device or to have their own device. There are all kinds of filtering, I don't know,
restrictions.
Filtering, even like hardware that you can have in your home that will help. And then there are lots of filtering things and that you can do in settings that will help reduce the risk of exposure to unwanted things. So to do your research there, be prepared for that. I'll probably say this a couple of times, but one of the best resources that I have found is there's a website called Defend Young Minds, and they've got some great information up to date on technology, on all of the streaming things, social media things, the gaming things, the music things, where kids are potentially at risk and how you can help minimize those risks. So do your research. Having said that, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I've heard this a couple of times, how as parents, we are very conscious in a lot of ways of the safety of our kids. We don't leave our front doors unlocked and all of our windows open if we live in a neighborhood. Because we don't want to invite unwanted people in. The minute you give your child a device unmonitored, you are literally opening the doors and windows of your home to your child, giving them full access to your child. And I think we just have to remember That's what we're talking about. So just like we would not invite any kind of stranger to go into our kid's bedroom, we should never allow our kids to be with their phone or device in a bedroom alone. So charging and all of that of the devices is done either in a public space of the home or the parents' bedroom, somewhere where the parents are the ones who can, lock it down while it's being charged, but never going to bed. We felt strongly, and again, different day and age, but we never allowed TVs in our kids' rooms because we're just like, we're not going to give them unmonitored access because they're just not, they were good kids. It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of kids are not capable of being responsible at this age and stage. That's why they have parents. And so we have to be the parent and put some of these practices. I think it's really good to set a time of what you feel comfortable with the length of time for screen time in a day. The numbers are astounding. I mean, I think it's average now that kids are spending anywhere from 5 to 8 hours a day on devices, which is crazy. So I think it's important for parents to set a time and then stick to it. I think it's important for parents to have that for themselves. I get you've got work, you've got emails, you've got to, check, do, or Zoom, or whatever all of the things are work related, but at home, that there's just set times for everybody, set limits, and then you have to stick with them. You can't just set them and let them go out the window.
Yeah. When you are doing that with your kids, is it just kind of, how do parents, if a kid comes up and is like, well, my friends, their mom lets them play on their iPad all day long, or they get to take it to school and all this stuff. How do you navigate that conversation with them? It's probably not like because I'm the parent and these are my rules. How do you do you explain to them why you're doing it? How do you navigate that conversation with the kids?
Yeah, I think obviously you do it age appropriately, but the younger ones, I would just say, well, you know what? God let me be the one to be your mommy, and this is what we think is best for you. And so this is going to be the rule for our house. And everybody has different rules about lots of different things in different families. But because this is our family and our home, this is how we do it. And then as they get older, they get maybe elementary school, then you're saying, you know what? There are just a lot of things that would not be helpful for you to see on devices. And so our job is to protect you. And I think the conversation is really important because what we want, even in this age of technology, is for our kids to come to us first when they have questions about anything. And that has to start early. And so we can't approach the conversations with fear or with, oh my gosh, get off of that, but to have these conversations ahead of time and real time. So when our child is on a device and maybe we have vetted a show, we pick a show on YouTube Kids, but we are giving them some instructions and say, hey, if anything pops up on the screen while you're watching the show that doesn't go with the show or looks scary or bad or you don't know what it is, always come run to me and show me what it is. Because sometimes people are going to try to scare you or show you things that would be harmful to you. And so have that conversation ahead of time. Have, when they go to school, before they go to school, have the conversation. Hey, if a kid ever says, hey, look at this, trying to show them something, I think it's something like 40% of 7 to 8-year-olds have been exposed to, it's 30 to 40% of 7 to 10-year-olds have been exposed to some kind of pornographic images, and almost all of them were shown by a friend.
Wow.
So to just give your child some words and some things to do, like, what do you want to show me, before they ever show you, and say, is it something I need to see or should see? Give them some questions to ask. If they show and they take a glance and they see it's not good, literally teach them to cover their eyes and to turn away and go get an adult. So just preparing them, having these conversations, putting some boundaries in, and then helping our kids be prepared for what those boundaries are, and to your point, why we have those boundaries are all really important.
So what do you do if, or rather when, your child is exposed to explicit language, pornographic images, or unsafe people through their device? Because it's almost inevitable to happen. What do you do when that happens?
Yeah, I think you just, without making it complicated or difficult, you just tell them, anytime you are playing a game, listening to music, watching something, or someone shows you something, that if it is anything that is scary, you don't feel comfortable with, or you don't even know or understand what it is, you walk away, you turn away, you go get an adult. If you're at school, you go get a teacher. If you're at home, you come to us. If you're at a friend's house, you go to that parent, or you call us. And you just set this, and you always tell them that they're not going to get in trouble for that.
That's what I was
When
about
it
to say.
is it just pops up. That you never, if you're gaming, you are playing with, if you know somebody, you're doing online gaming, whatever, you know this person, if anybody else joins in, you come running and tell me. Not because you're going to get in trouble, but because I want to help you. And this organization that I was just talking about, Defend Young Minds, they've got 2 great books. One, it's the same book, but there's a younger version for like preschool, and then a elementary version. It's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And it just talks about some real practical, simple ways to address it when they are exposed, because you're right, it's not if, it's when these things are going to happen. And then we should always, as parents, as once they have a device, all of that, they should never have unmonitored access. So for our kids, even through college, as long as we were paying for the device, we had full access. We had every password. We had all of it. And we could go in at any time and look through browsing histories. We could look through text messages, all of that. There's now so many different things you would have to look through. Again, this is where you have to do your research. The things that these kind of people with these subversive agendas, the way they access apps that seem to just be a simple game. I read that they were accessing kids through Minecraft and through, we know the Snapchat, but even Instagram, putting all of this bait out there.
Oh, yeah.
So just helping our kids be ready for it, and then to say, okay, when it happens, here's what you do.
Yeah.
Stop immediately, go get an adult.
And you never meet them on the other end when they do. You never react with anger or in trouble because then it's going to scare them. Like, I have to protect this and
Right.
I have to hide this from you.
Right. Yes. And when they do it, you praise them
Yeah.
like crazy.
Yeah.
Good job. That was exactly the right thing to do. I'm so sorry that happened. I'm so sorry you thought that or you saw that. And then in that elementary age, just have the conversation. Don't be willing to say, to ask, tell me what you saw. What do you have questions about? From really 6 or 7 to 10, there's lots of, and then, so that's pre-puberty, but there's lots of development going on in their bodies, in their brains, in hormones, all of that. So do not make topics or words off limits to your kids to ask about. And, don't have this big reaction, when they say, what is sex? Say, you know what? I am so glad you asked me that. If they don't ask by age 7, it's probably time for you to initiate the conversation and to say, hey, here's something you're going to hear about, something I want you to know about in a very age-appropriate way. And I'm not talking about going through all of the physical things, but I'm talking about, hey, sex is a word you're going to hear. This sex is something that is a gift from God for a man and a woman when they are married. It's a way they express love to each other. And you have just simple, straightforward conversations. And as they ask more questions, you answer their questions. And so I would say to not avoid words like sex or pornography, nudity. Don't avoid those, but talk about them. Even body parts. Early on, we want to have the conversation with our kids that none of our body parts, none of anybody's body parts are bad, but there are some that are private. And so anything that a swimsuit covers, those are private. So no one should ever see or touch those parts. So you have those conversations real early and then grow with them.
Yeah. What do you suggest for parents that are kind of fearful to have those conversations, or they tend to shy away because it's just like, I don't want to open up that world, because I feel like that's what some parents do. It's like, if I say this, of course they're going to be curious and want to know. So what advice would you have for those parents?
I would say it's still better to initiate the conversation and to say, hey, if you don't want to hear about this right now, that's fine. But whenever you do want to talk about this, please come to me first. Do not search it on the internet first. Come talk to me first, and we will do it together. For those who feel lost and like, what do I even say? What's appropriate? There are great resources. I would say get a book. There are several kids' books that are written and designed to talk about body parts, to talk about sex, to this one on good pictures, bad pictures is about how to have a conversation about porn. And so use a book. Those are great ways to spark a conversation and to make you feel more comfortable and your kids feel more comfortable to ask you questions. And they may come with some questions that you don't have the answer to. And you say, you know what? I don't know. I'm going to have to check into that. But give me a day to check into it, and then we'll talk about it some more.
Yeah. Because their minds are growing, kids.
Yeah.
And I feel like just opening up that conversation, kids love being talked to and feeling understood and not just kind of like, okay, I'm just doing it because my parents told me so. So I love that. Kind of.
Even, let me just say this, even on like bad words. Sometimes we would just, our kids were in public schools, so we knew that they were hearing. Sometimes they would come home and say, somebody said I said a bad word. Here's what I said. And I know one day Megan came home and she said, somebody said I said a bad word today. And I said, well, what did you say? And she said, somebody asked me what kind of dog I had. And she said, we have a Shih Tzu. And they said, you said a bad word. She said, did I? And so we explained, here's the word that they were talking about. Here's what it means. So even to hear you say it out loud, it kind of takes some of the mystery away. And so if they come to you, or sometimes we might say, hey, have you ever heard your kids say this word? And at first it's like, and they're like,
did you just say that?
Yes. And we'd be like, okay, do you know what that means? So here's why we would never use that word.
Yeah. I think that's a great conversation. Kind of going back, talking about monitoring and kids' devices and stuff. Is there such thing as too much monitoring? Is there a way to do it without being overbearing, or is more better than nothing?
Absolutely, more is better than nothing. I have trouble thinking of a situation that any type of monitoring would not be appropriate for a parent and a child. There is a reason they are a child. There is a reason they were given to us by God. There's a reason that they're in our home. And to say, well, it's their phone, it's their room, that doesn't compute with me, because it's not their phone and their room. They haven't earned it. They haven't earned the money to pay for it. They're incapable of that. And so why would we put the full weight of the responsibility of that on them? It's just an unkind thing to do to our kids, I think. And so I do not think that there is, I don't know that there might be some situation that I'm not aware of, but I don't know of how you could monitor too much, honestly.
Yeah.
If you've a kid who is under 18 in your home on your payroll, using all of the devices and spaces that you've paid for, that you're providing as a parent, it's not theirs.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said earlier about, it's not about a lack of trust. So I feel like that's where the argument, some parents will be like, well, then my kid doesn't think I'll trust them. It's like, no, it's not about that. It's about protection, right?
Yeah. And it's about teaching them responsibility. And you have to do that together. You can't just say, okay, here's your phone to, let's say, a 10-year-old. Here's the phone. here's the list of rules, go have fun. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You have to do it with them. And to me, this is kind of like, where it says in the Bible, in Deuteronomy, it tells parents, says, here are the things to teach your kids, and do it as you walk along the road, as you sit, as you lie down. So all throughout the day, we're supposed to be having these constant, ongoing conversations with our kids just about life. And so this is a big part of life. So having these ongoing conversations about what is appropriate, what is responsible, how we handle these things, the earlier we do it and the more we can do it preemptively and proactively as parents rather than reactively, the better off our kids will be. And if the genie's already out of the bottle, your kids already have their phones, already have access, it is totally fine and appropriate to say, hey, we've been doing it this way, but we feel like it's that we haven't been doing a good job of helping you be ready to handle this kind of responsibility, this kind of exposure, this amount of information and input that could be coming. So we want to do a better job as parents. So here's how we're going to do it now. And they may not like it. They may, be disappointed or upset. That's okay. But say, that's why we're the parent. And we say, this is what we think is the wise thing to do, what's best for you. So this is how it's going to be. And if they go against that, there have to be consequences. And when they comply and embrace it, there are rewards. Probably not digital rewards, but I'd find other rewards.
Other rewards. To end on it, the article that you've brought, do you want to talk about that?
We kind of have talked about it, but all of this, a bunch of articles on social media, on what's appropriate, how to have age-appropriate conversations, all of that. A lot of these articles are on that Defend Young Minds. I have no connection to them. I've just found it a helpful resource.
Yeah. Is there any last piece of advice you would give to parents going through this digital battle and feeling like they're alone in it, or just feeling like, how am I going to navigate this? What would you say to them?
Yeah. I think I would say it's kind of like parenting in general. It's a big job. It can be scary, and there's lots of things, lots of unknowns out there. But we don't want to parent from a place of fear.
Yeah.
And this is why, as a parent, I can't imagine parenting without God's help. And so asking Him to help you, asking Him to help you see the things you need to see. And we would always ask the Lord, and we would tell our kids, hey, we feel like God will speak to us on the inside that, hey, I think you better check their phone. Or, we would have these random thoughts, seemingly random thoughts, and we would go check, and it's like, okay, good thing we checked.
Yeah.
And so now we can have a conversation. So I would say to not be fearful in terms of letting it paralyze you, or to just say, I don't know what to do. They're going to be exposed to it anyway, so here you go.
Yeah.
To not do either extreme, but to parent always, where no matter what topic we're talking about, digital boundaries or behavior or respect or whatever it is, do it in relationship with your kids.
Yeah.
That's what we're after, is to have healthy relationships with our kids, and so they know how to have a healthy relationship with God and others.
That's great. A great note to end on. Thank you guys for tuning into this episode about digital media, social media, and everything that falls with it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Just remember that you can parent and we can help.